a word I've been really loving recently and leaning into is enthusiasm. I think we're all searching to be enthusiastic about something. And so once I start to, gain some enthusiasm towards something, I just keep pulling on that string a little bit and then see where it lands.
Welcome to the Zero Quit Podcast, where we bring you inside the minds of elite athletes, business owners, specialists, and other creatives. I'm your host, Covington, and through these conversations, you'll hear practical advice and effective strategies for optimizing not only your performance, but also your habits and routines as well. If you enjoy the show, be sure to subscribe and share it with a friend. What's going on, guys? Today, I have the pleasure of going on for a great trail run and then also doing the podcast with Mike Aidala.
Perfect.
There we go. Nailed it. Mike Aidala, he's a leading men's performance coach and elite athlete based in Boulder, Colorado. He's done a lot of crazy things, including a 315-pound single-arm overhead squat, holds the world record for most weight lifted by Turkish Get Up in 1 hour, and a bunch of other craziness. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so the first thing I want to kick off with is a quote you have on your website and ties to kind of Stoic philosophies from Marcus Aurelius, is the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. So I guess that's a good way to kind of leap off a little bit of your personal philosophy. We talked about it a little bit on the trail run, but how you view, I guess, especially with your clients, personal development and I guess your personal philosophy on identifying the self and personal identity in a society that's so focused on kind of conformity and external opinions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, well, before we get started on that, my Turkish Get Up record is broken. And so
we're just going to ignore that.
But I just want to call it out. I don't want to be claiming I have the record. But I'm going to come back for either that one or a different one. But I think a lot of times it's based on perspective, right? We're all searching for a different kind of perspective within our life. And that is, given to us based on our life experiences. And so understanding how my perspective has been molded from prior experiences, and then is that molding or perspective or mindset continuing to, allow me to live the life that I truly want to lead. And so, I mean, your question's a big one because it gets into how do I know that this is something that I truly desire versus this is something that has been projected onto me or is something that I'm judging myself on based on the outside world versus like a true connection with what I want inside my heart.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me on the way up here, as I mentioned to you, I've been getting more and more into Western philosophy and working through all the different schools of thought. And one that I'm got some books in the mail. They're all very dense, but it's the school of thought is phenomenology. And it kind of talks a lot about subject and object. Subject being like, our own consciousness, how we perceive the world and experience it because, like we can look at things very scientifically and objectively if this is how it is. And I guess how I'm tying that in is a lot of times I think we look at ourselves as like this object and we try and look and see and objectify, what our value is and if we should kind of fit in line with society rather than looking at our own, introspective experiences and kind of see, where do we find our authentic self, like you said, and how does this relate to what we actually want out of life? And, one question I have too is, do you feel like you've always been this kind of introspective person or what led you down this road to where, you're obviously coaching men and women at this point, but I don't know. I think my own journey has shaped over the years as I've become to know myself more, know what I want more. I guess I'm trying to get a kind of insight into your journey through that. Mm-hmm. And I guess journey into defining your own identity and figuring out what you want out of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was a moment when I was in my early 20s when I was living, it was actually like right after college. Yeah. So I guess early 20s when I was so confused on what I wanted to do. I didn't know, should I go to a GA position? Should I go work as a strength and conditioning coach? Like, where should I live? What should I do? It's like every option seemed available. Yeah. I mean, not every option seemed like a path that I could grow towards. Yeah. And I became so overwhelmed. I was worrying all the time and it was eating me up inside. I was constantly Googling, what's the best place to live in the United States? What's the best job for someone in my position? What's the best job for someone that had, this master, this like degree or whatever? And I was constantly looking outside of myself to figure out how I should lead my life. And around that time, I started getting involved with more personal development, and I was managing and co-owning a gym, and we were about to open up a second space. And, I had read a book called Radical Honesty, which is essentially we all wear this proverbial mask within our lives. And that mask is based on our perception of how we want the outside world to perceive us. But essentially, you're putting on performance nonstop to different people at all times, and it becomes really overwhelming and pulls you away from who you truly are. And so I've thought to myself, I love working out in the gym. I love helping athletes get bigger, faster, stronger. I love helping people become more embodied. But what I really love is like what happens in between the sets and the reps, what happens between the workouts, like what are the deeper questions that people are asking themselves in their life and that I'm asking myself. And so it set me off to what I called an alternative graduate studies program, where I traveled the world studying all things that were interesting to me, and had to be really honest with myself that is the direction that I wanted to take my life and move away from, what seemed like an amazing life at the time. I was going to buy this like fancy new car, maybe going to buy a house, going to be owning these gyms, be young 20-something-year-old in New York, like feeling like the man, but it's not truly what I wanted. And so that really is kind of like what really kickstarted that, and that was a huge like first development in Mike's self-love bank account. And I just had a backpack and just traveled, stayed at hostels, was super cheap, did it, but that belief in myself and that huge action towards that really catalyzed a lot more of that introspective practice, and then wanting to share that with other people from the over a decade ago it was. I think you nailed it, because I think we've all experienced that. Some people experience it as like a midlife crisis, but a lot of people experience it right out of either high school or college, right, where the world is their oyster and everything is an opportunity, and it's almost overwhelming and anxious because it leads to a lot of anxiety, because people are kind of at a loss. This is the first point of their life where they are in the driver's seat. A lot of times your parents sign you up for sports as a kid, you follow public education, you're going to the classes you're supposed to, you're doing everything you're supposed to. And even a lot of people go to college just because they're supposed to, not even because they want to or because they're interested in this major. And once they graduate, it's like, wait, now it's up to me. Now it's my time, and I have all these different options and areas and directions I could go, and it is overwhelming. And I think people, when they are faced with that dilemma, they force themselves almost like a square into a circle hole, right? Where they try and force and mold themselves into, the job that they're supposed to have, or buy the things they're supposed to buy, or do the things they're supposed to do, or, what job's going to make me the most income, instead of taking the time to realize, at 22, 25, whatever it is, 40 years old, you don't have to automatically decide this is who I'm going to be and I'm going to be this thing forever. You can take the time. I forget the whole term you used, but I loved it, because it is this time to kind of explore the world, explore yourself, find your interest, and be okay that you have multiple interests, right? And not define yourself by like one identity or one singular activity or being or job or place you go to, right? Yeah, totally. I mean, this is a lot of the work that I do as a performance coach now, and I was using a word that I have, and you used another one that I have an ear out for, like, and I hear it every single day and probably talk about this concept all day, and it's around the idea of ownership, but through the language that we either express out of our mouths or in our ears, and it's the word should or supposed to. And all those are based on an outside expectation of what the world is putting onto us, whether we're getting that through an ad, whether we're getting that through standards, our parents, our friends, like standards, like anything. And so when you eliminate that word should from your vocabulary, like literally never let yourself utter the word should ever again your whole life, and every time you want to say should or supposed to, you can get kind of sneaky around the should, but you get the idea. You insert the words want or don't want. And what that does is immediately forces you to take ownership over your experience. It gives you ownership over your language, then over your actions, and ultimately over your life. And so that's a small thing that's not small, because again, we're inundated with outside expectations. We're inundated with podcasts that we're listening to even now. Like the last thing I want to do is tell anyone what they should do. My job as a coach is to help illuminate you as an individual to be the most actualized and honest version of yourself. You can't be the best version of yourself all of the time, but I think the most honest is the best. And so being mindful of where you're getting those inputs that are putting the outside expectations on yourself, and then developing a really solid filter on how to work through those, and then how to put that filter against what are my own truths and desires.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Because if you're always living in should, how could you possibly be living in or living in accordance with what you want to be in your authentic self? Because it is kind of, it's contrary to live internally if you're trying to live along the terms of purely external. With your coaching and all the clients you've worked with over the years, where do you find that, we could talk about men specifically or just people in general, but where men are getting stuck at as far as making this change, or what is the common problems you hear people see why they can't actually live out their authentic self, or the big clear problems and mistakes they're making, if that makes sense? Maybe that's too broad.
No, I mean, listen, everyone has their own lens on the world, right? Like their own perspective. And so my job is to jump into my client's shoes, see how they see the world, and then help illuminate certain like blind spots or shadow aspects so that they can see things in a different light. And oftentimes we're scared, right? There's a lot of fear that if I make this change, if I leave this job, if I leave this relationship, if I break up with this friend, my life's over. Like it's going to be such a huge flash, or, not flashback, but like pushback on
So it's
that.
almost like they tie these constants in their life. If one, it's like a Jenga tower, right? If one block gets pulled, they feel like everything's crumbling.
That's a great analogy, like you kind of build up, or a lot of people will build up their identity based on like where they live, who they're friends with, what job they have, how much money they have. And if you pull out one of those things, it crumbles based on, or rather than building the foundation on who you are as an individual and what your values and morals are. And then on top of that, you can stack whatever you want. And if it falls, it doesn't fall very far because you can just pick up something else.
Yeah, it's almost like building a Jenga tower off the single pieces, and it's like a weak base, right?
Exactly.
So what we're trying to do is build like a strong, firm base. How often do you hear the excuse, in relation to a lot of these obligations and experiences people have, of the whole kind of, make it a broad way, time, family, or work obligation excuse, where it's like I don't have time to either work out, or making these changes is hard because my wife isn't like maybe as supportive as she could be, or could be a family member's counteractive to what they're trying to do. And how do you approach that response and that almost defense mechanism people give out?
Yeah, I receive that response all the time, every day, right? And I appreciate you bringing it up because I can talk about it really enthusiastically and break things down so they seem simple, which I think is important. We need to be able to understand it. But, the key is helping people really get clear on like, what is the thing that's blocking me? What is really stopping me from that? And if it's time, let's look at your calendar. Like, we'll say, show me your calendar, I'll show you your values, right? And so open up your calendar, or we see how you're spending your most valuable asset, your time, every single day. And if it's on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, or drinking alcohol or watching porn or hanging out with friends that you don't really have a deep connection with, or whatever it is, now we eliminate all of those things, which is the first step in any type of peak performance, is creating the space for it first. And then now all of a sudden we can see, wow, I have 15 hours a week. Like that comes out to over a month a year that people can free up within their life when they just really audit their time.
Well, the problem is most people are very dishonest with themselves, right? And I've experienced this a ton with...
Period. That's like period, podcast over. Be honest with yourself.
And one specifically is an easy one, is people are so dishonest about what they eat, right? They're like, I should be losing weight. I barely eat anything, right? You hear that all the time if you personal training with clients. Like I'm not snacking. I'm not doing this, that. And then if you have them actually write down or track in MyFitnessPal what they're really eating, you're like, oh, you went to Tropical Smoothie and had an 800 calorie smoothie, or oh, that drink at Starbucks you get every other day is like 600 calories. It's more like a milkshake. It's like you mentioned. I think people are very, I don't even know how else to describe it. I think it's the perfect word, dishonest about how they spend their time. And even I think, as I'd like to, maybe this is unfair to characterize us both, but I'd like to say we're both productive people. We still have both things that distract us, and we're not perfect, obviously, and we have areas that we could even improve upon. So it's always good to, like you said, run that audit of yourself and figure out, okay, am I being honest with myself? How can I either strip things that are non-essential away and replace them with more essential or ideal things and habits.
Yeah, I think that's a very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Right? It requires a very strong ego, a very strong sense of self.
Yeah.
Because if your self is wrapped up in these things, then you strip them away and you're at a loss of identity. And then you can fall into getting anxiety, depression, etc. And so that's why it can be really helpful to have either a great friend, a coach, someone that is like non-objective in your life, doesn't have, isn't emotionally invested in you. They just want to help you grow and can kind of just put the facts as honestly out on the wall as possible. And then you can see, oh, wow, I am overeating. Like I recently did that. I've never tracked my food before. I've always just ate for performance. Yeah. And I got MyFitnessPal and tracked my macros. Dude, the first week I was like, whoa, I am overeating like a machine. Yeah. Like there's no wonder. Like, maybe I don't have the aesthetic goals I might want to achieve. Yeah. And so just the awareness of that, now I'm like, oh my gosh, great. Now I know, at least I know when I'm overeating or when I'm messing up. But you take that same analogy and put it into your mindset. Like, how can you track your mindset? Exercise I use with some of my clients is a mindset log. Anytime that they have internal dialogue come up, they need to pull that log out and write it down. And then we reflect on that after a week and can see, okay, let's look at some of the aspects of your life that have like hit that mindset. But because if I ask a lot of people, how's your mindset? They're going to say, it's good. Like, okay, it's all right. I don't know. Sometimes I struggle, but we don't know when that is. Then it's going to be a lot harder to change it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like anything, right? Like the more you can track and take observation, take notice of the things you're experiencing, the more you can be aware of how to manipulate those down the road. One thing I want to get your opinion on is, especially as a coach, and because this can be very popular on Instagram, is on affirmations and the idea of affirmations versus evidence, because I've seen Alex Hormozy post about this and talk about this to where he's not a huge fan of the more general affirmations that are like I am strong, or I am a king, or I am these kind of more generic or cliche things, and he says more so you're going to instill that and instill a stronger mindset, more confidence when you have reason to, when you have evidence. Like, for example, if you think you're productive or great, well, just saying it doesn't do anything. But if you, like we talked about, take the steps to exercise consistently, audit your time, take actual physical steps and create, evidence of, look how these changes I've made, then you can say that with more confidence because you actually deep down believe it. So I guess, how do you use or don't use affirmations? How do you view them? What are your thoughts on that whole conundrum?
Yeah, so I like Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah.
I'll quote him here. Be about that action, boss.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. So when he was in the Super Bowl, they want to interview him, and he just didn't have anything to say because he was like, my actions on the field speak anything that I have to say. And so your actions directly correlate to your confidence, which is what people do affirmations for. They want to gain confidence. And so I think it can be helpful to hear, like to have someone that really believes in you, like that feels good. But the goal is to believe in yourself. So you don't need those things on the outside. And the best way you gain self-belief is, like you just mentioned, through action.
What, especially, either personally with you or with clients, what are your thoughts on this idea? You can really go in a million directions with it, but this idea of becoming, right? And finding purpose and fulfillment in becoming. And this is like a concept that's talked about in a lot of existentialist writing, but just in general, personal development, how we're constantly in this area of evolution, right? Where our bodies are never constant, our minds are never constant, we're always emotionally changing, we're always experiencing different stimuli. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that idea of perpetual becoming and this, I guess, never-ending cycle of evolving as a human being and being okay with that journey? Because I guess to tie it in, a lot of times we kind of want these quick fixes to our mindset, but really it's years and years of picking up on different books or ideas that shape us into who we are.
Yeah, I think it's, what timeline are you living your life on? Is it hours and days, days and weeks, weeks and months, months and years, or years and decades? And the most successful people that I know live their life in years and decades. They look at things on a different time scale. And so when we think about our problems, like just the lens of how we think about something like time can be really helpful, because if we're thinking about it on a shorter term, there's a lot of pressure, and then we're always in that catch-up mode. We're always trying to become ourselves or grow into ourselves, and it leads to, you know, an overwhelming feeling versus, you know, just allowing the space for it. You know, my partner Kelly has a great quote that she say, you know, I want to create a pace for more space in my life. And so I love that one. And it's so true. It's, you know, we can't force things into existence. We have to allow them into existence and create the space and environment for that to happen. And so from that, then being able to reflect on it, then you can really create the life and the individual that you want to become.
I want to pick up off on that, and you know, especially when it comes to shifting to different interests and this idea of becoming is one thing you posted about earlier this week was being comfortable feeling stupid and being comfortable not knowing or having that beginner mindset. So I guess, do you want to expand upon the value of having that, you know, novice or humble attitude towards different interests or areas of life?
Yeah, I think the beginner's mindset, or in the Japanese language, shoshin, is like, it's such an important quality in order to be really successful. And when I mean successful, I just mean like feeling successful in whatever it is that you want to do and enjoying the process. You know, if you think of a young kid, everything is new to them, right? Or a lot of things are new to them, and they're so engaged and present in the moment. And I think the greater we can maintain presence within the moment, then the greater we can experience our life. And so if I can look at things and try to see them for the first time, almost every time, then I can gain a greater experience. Or again, like we talked about in the beginning, that perception can be increased. And so in order to do that, you need to allow yourself to suck at something, or you know, for lack of a better word, or to be able to be humble by it, or to be honest by that. And that's something that is difficult, again, if your self-identity and your ego is built on that Jenga thing of like what I do, because then now you do something not great, and then you might not feel great. Yeah,
and I think you're certainly a master of this in terms of, and something I'm trying to do is more myself, and I have done over the past few years, is when you have to try so many different sports or different areas and different skills, you have to be humble, right? Because you might be, you know, the best at doing a squat, but then you go and get into the running world and you're nothing, right? And you have to rebuild yourself from that and go in with that beginner mindset. And, you know, then you get into strongman, you get into Turkish Get Ups, whatever it is, it is a new skill, and you might have some base, but you never start off elite, and you do have to build that up. And after you do that enough times, when you do get elite, you never have an ego, because you understand, you have that perspective of a beginner, and you kind of retain that no matter what you enter, you know. One thing, do you want to add on that? Or?
I mean, I'd agree with you. Yeah, I agree. I think it again requires that humbleness, but it's also like you don't necessarily have to suck at things.
Yeah,
like, so exactly. I was saying that before, and I wish I didn't say it that way, because I think if you can have a mindset of curiosity, then you're just curious about it. And when you're curious or you're practicing something, then you never have to be perfect at it. I mean, I love the saying of practice everything. Right? I try to practice everything. How I brush my teeth. I practice the dishes. I practice how I tie my shoes. I practice putting on my clothes. I also practice weightlifting, and I practice running, and I practice coaching. Practice my whole life. Yeah. And what that does for me mentally is I'm constantly evolving, and I can get better, and it bring more presence to something versus like just doing it. Because when you just do it, you just get it done, and you can't actually enjoy that experience. And there's a lot of things in life, like doing the dishes, that we don't necessarily like to do, but if you practice it, it can become more of a meditative type of experience that can add a lot of value to your life.
Yeah, I like that. I think, it's definitely, it's not just a perspective of, you know, okay, I suck at something, but it is a perspective of, I guess, appreciating that there is no end goal, and that it is a perpetual, everlasting cycle of development, or, you know, how can I get better? How can I enjoy this more, do this more, whatever it is. So I think that leads into a good thing that we talked about on our run that I want to get into, is this idea of, you know, we are very fixated on goals, and I think goals are extremely important for a variety of reasons, but there are some negative consequences of them when they are tied to, you know, this long-term income that you say, you know, this, once I hit this income, then I'll be good, or I hit this certain squat, then I'll be good, or I get this certain job, or I get this certain point in your life, then you'll be good. But in reality, it's like once you reach that point, your almost purpose and fulfillment, happiness can be lost, because now you've lost that purpose that you were working towards, that you were in that direction aiming towards. And I guess I'll reference again the story I told you about, where I believe it's a play called Waiting for Godot. And the story is, in a very simple terms, is these two guys sitting on a bench, and they're waiting for this friend, Godot, to appear and meet them there. And in the entire play, one friend is kind of telling him, like, hey, like, why don't we go? Like, we've been waiting forever. It's been hours. And then he's like, no, like, Godot's coming. He's like, all right, it's been days. He's like, he's not coming. And he's like, no, we're waiting for Godot. He's on the way. And it's kind of this idea of just the waiting itself almost becomes the goal rather than actually reaching it. Once you reach it, it's almost like you don't appreciate it as much, or the purpose and the meaning's gone. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that and kind of our discussion earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the cliche saying too, like the journey, or it's more about the journey than the destination.
Yeah.
And it's so true. And so a lot of times it's, again, if you have your identity in the goal or in the thing outside of you, then you're not going to appreciate the thing it is to get there. You're just going to try to get there, cut corners, maybe hurt yourself, and what I mean by that is like not get a lot of sleep, like lose touch in some of your relationships, some of the things that are most important to you.
You almost got to look at the goal as a vehicle for your own personal development journey. Like you're just almost switching into different cars, different goals, different, purposes, interests, experiences, as you're on this eventual road that is that never-ending road of personal development, of life, of experience, of becoming. At least that's how I can kind of think of it in a analogical way, I guess. Another thing I want to dive into that we talked about on our run as well, we almost did like a little pre-podcast for the podcast, but it's good, is being your authentic self on social media. Because we both, you've been in the game a lot longer, as not to put the term on you, influencer game for a while on social media, and it can be very rewarding, but at the same time, it can almost incentivize you to not be your authentic self, and brand deals and money and likes and follows can be very tempting, especially with, Reels experience, or recently I've experienced it to where, I really enjoy taking a really nice solid photo, putting a very reflective, interesting, well-written caption in there, but that doesn't get many likes these days. It is Reels to trending audios. It is fast, upbeat stuff. And, that's something I've had to reflect on is, where do I want to exist along social media? Do I want to be on the trendy side? Do I want to chase these followers? Or do I want to be, completely myself and not be absorbed at all by hype or, cloud, or all these different things that are incentivizing me where the money's at? So with that long preamble, what are your thoughts on, social media and being yourself and finding your route within it?
Yeah, I think it depends on what it is that you're using it for.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I ask myself, why am I using social media? Like, what is it doing for me? Mm-hmm. And if it's doing something for like my ego, for me personally, then it's something to look at. That's helpful, which it has in the past. But now I call it service media. So I try to put out things that can help other people, things that I've learned along my path, or from my coaching experience, or my clients I've learned, and just share that out. And I try to not really, like, I obviously want it to reach more people, because then it can help more people. Yeah. But there is a delicate balance, or it's not even delicate, it's just a line of like, am I doing this because I want to serve people, or am I doing this because I want it to, receive a ton of different likes or whatnot?
I think that's perfect. Is as simple as it sounds, asking the question, why? Why am I doing this? And that can be for anything in life. Honestly, all the things we talked about could be like, why? What is my purpose for doing this habit, for exercise, for whatever? And you can get a lot of answers, I think, just out of asking that question, reflecting on it. But especially with social media, you're like, why am I on this? Is it for a brand? Is it for financial reasons? And if so, like you said, you can recognize that and make sure that reflects in your content and treat it as a business, treat it as a brand. But like you said, if it is, more to serve people, or it is, maybe just to share with friends and family, or just for you personally, maybe it's just a personal diary. A lot of times I tell people, even if you don't want to like post for other people or become an influencer, just almost using it as like a hard drive and looking back on either training clips or moments of your life. It's a good way to look at that, right? And so I think I like that. I like, as simple as it sounds, like the first thing you said was just reflecting on why. So another thing that you do a lot of work in, and I have like no knowledge besides like the, knowing what the term, I guess, is, but flow state, right? And I think you did some specialized or formalized training, right, with somebody on flow state. Is that accurate? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess walk us through what drew you to flow state, your experience with, getting that, accreditation, and describe what flow state even is, basically.
Yeah. So flow state's a term that comes from positive psychology, and positive psychology is essentially the science and art of human flourishing. So taking someone who's like, life's pretty good. Like a lot of my clients will feel like, yeah, I'm like, it's like 70, 80%, like things are pretty good, but things could be better. And I don't know how to close that gap from good to great. And so inserting positive psychology in there is what I do as a performance coach, a peak performance coach. And so flow state is that state where you're completely engaged in the moment, when you're maybe running downhill and the skills that you have meet the challenge that's ahead of you. So you're completely, again, singularly focused on the task at hand. A lot of times we'll think about it with athletes or musicians or people who are performing because they need to be as completely focused as possible. But a lot of the work that I do with people is helping them get into flow state in their everyday life, in their job. Like I talked about before, when you're practicing something, you're bringing more presence. You can get into flow doing the dishes, brushing your teeth, going for a walk.
Is it more eliminating external distractions and limiting factors, or is it more heightening your ability to perform the act? Or is it both?
Those are kind of the same thing. Like
That's
have
true.
to eliminate the distraction to be able to enhance the way that you perform the act.
Yeah, I guess in most cases that probably is the case. What are some ways that people can, of course this is something you typically have to work with people like yourself over time, but I guess some ways that people could try to trigger or command their own flow state, like some, I guess, applicable ways that they can try and take advantage of this right now, in a sense. Any tips or advice?
Yeah, so the easiest definition I like to use is like if you think of a graph, and on one axis is the skill that you have, and on the other is the challenge. And so if I tell you our workout today is 1 lap around the block, that is going to be too low of a challenge for your skill, so you'll become bored. But if I tell you our challenge is to run up, Mount Everest, that challenge is too much
hard,
for your skill, and so you become anxious. And so I got to give you you need to create on your own the correct amount of challenge for the skill that you have, so you're engaged in the moment.
So it's like threading that needle of, hard enough that it's, fulfilling and difficult to achieve, or because it's difficult to achieve, it is fulfilling, but not too hard that it's unachievable when you're overextending yourself and I guess getting nothing out of it.
Yeah. Or distracted. You know what I mean? Like we'll go back to social media before. Yeah. Like there is a weight. I have this book right here, The Chaos Machine, right? And it talks a lot about the dangers of social media. Like those companies spend billions of dollars, and I know that some of this podcast will be on social media, but a lot of my job is to help people get off of social media, and so and to be more present in their life and the things that are most important to them. And I know you're big into philosophy, so like I think a lot about the memento mori idea of like remembering you must die, and on your deathbed, are you going to be upset that you didn't spend more time scrolling on social media, or are you going to be more upset that you didn't spend time going on that trip with your buddies, or leaning into a relationship with your wife or your kids or your partner? And so when you can look at it kind of from the end back, it really puts things into perspective and helps you change and take action on what's important to you today.
That's what I've thought a lot about too. Again, to tie things back to earlier topics was, really analyzing, being honest with myself about the content I'm posting as far as, am I going to look back, like you said, years from now, or it could be even weeks, and be proud of this advertisement I posted for this other brand, or am I going to be really proud of this caption where I actually poured out a really important thought or idea, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, again, knowing what you're trying to get out of it, and having that broader perspective of a lifetime, like you mentioned way earlier, was having that time, that idea, that concept of time, I guess, intermingled and intertwined into that perspective. You know, it's all relative, right?
Yeah. Think about that one concept too. Like,
Yeah.
when you're, is social media or Instagram the best avenue for you to express yourself?
Yeah.
Right? A lot of work I do with myself and with clients is based on self-expression.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more you can like actualize and like genuinely express your thoughts and your feelings, the better you're going to feel. And so social media is just a tool that is one way of doing it. You have to fit a picture into a box. You have a certain amount of caption. On Twitter, you have a certain amount of characters. But are those the best way for you or for me or for John to do that? And a lot of times it's not. And it's just allowing yourself to have the creativity and the curiosity to explore something different.
Yeah, to know there's multiple tools, multiple ways to get to
endless. I mean, I was just on a road trip and we just drove by some petroglyphs.
Yeah.
And like, people thousands of years ago were expressing themselves on rocks. We do the same thing now. It's just, what is the best way of going about that?
Yeah. To wrap things up on flow state, you mentioned on your website an idea of recovering from flow state. And I wanted to get your perspective and I guess explanation on that idea, because I guess my first instinct would be to think that having that heightened focus and heightened ability, you do need to decompress and deregulate and come down from that. Is that the way that you see it, and why is that important?
No way, baby. This America can go full
Hard
tilt
all the time.
all day.
You do not listen to David Goggins, right?
No, we have to come down.
Yeah.
Certain people can have, they can maintain that flow a little bit longer than others.
Yeah.
One of my best friends and our friend Eric Hinman, he's a great example of that.
Yeah.
He can maintain flow for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And then he does need to recover. I would say average person, most people, myself included, between 60 and 90 minutes is like where I can maintain deep flow focused work, whether that's on a client call, on a podcast, on something that I'm typing up in a computer.
Yeah.
Once it starts to get longer than that, it's going to diminish my ability to come back to flow either later on in the day or the next day. And that's really the key. Like, you could push through all day and stay in it, but then there's consequences.
Yeah. It made me think too, when you talked about, certain, I can hold it for an hour or something like that. It made me think about how I tell my wife, I tell people, after 4 o'clock, I'm useless. And it's more because I'm very productive earlier in the day. And it could be for a variety of reasons, energy, sunlight, whatever. But I think it's also important to know, not just know, how to get in your flow state and when to deregulate, but I guess knowing the most optimal times that you can be you or perform certain activities too.
That is a huge part of it. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's also what you're getting into flow in, right? Like, you could be in flow playing video games, which will feel really good, and you'll feel very productive, and you'll beat the characters and get to different levels. But is that going to be something that you value and you're proud that you did, later on in your life? And so, or pushing you towards your goals. And so a large part, and this is a great thing for people to focus on, is when am I cognitively the best that I can be? When is my brain like on fire and pushing it to the max? And for most people, it's going to be in the morning. There are some people who are like, night owls, and it'll be in the evening. And then the next thing is to ask yourself, well, what am I doing during that time? And so if I would jump out of bed and my brain is on fire, or I have some coffee or do my morning routine and I'm like dialed in, and then I go work out at that time, now my workout's going to feel really great. I'm going to feel really like I push myself hard there, but that might, unless I'm a professional athlete, like, I'm going to be wasting some of my most cognitively productive time on something that isn't necessarily worth it.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, I'm sure you work a lot with your clients doing this and yourself, is structuring your day around when you're at your peak ability for certain tasks, right? So, I'll spend the evenings when I am in a position to where I don't want to be as cognitively stressed, So in the evenings, I'll spend time with, wife. I'll have dinner and relax, allow myself to have some entertainment, whether it is, a TV show, or it is, watching a movie with her, or just doing whatever, just talking with her. Something that's less, I guess, cognitively stressful. it still requires me to be engaged and be active, but not as much as, let's say, it is not as high stress as work or, workout or something like that. So what I'll do is I'll position and structure my day to where, I told you I'll like read in the morning when I'm most attentive and focused and awake, and then I'll work out after while I have that energy and I'm not thinking about stress or client work later in the day. Then I'll get to that stuff, because if I do it too early, then while I'm working out or trying to read, like my mind's squirrely, right? And it's all over the place. So I guess it's like knowing how to structure your day in the way that best suits and optimizes the things that you need to get done.
Yeah, totally. And there's some cool like science around that,
Yeah.
on what's best there. One thing I'll say though is, your brain doesn't know the difference between stress at work and a stressful TV show or a stressful movie. And so a lot of times,
that's a good point to make.
You were just chatting about that, and people will say, "Oh, I just need to like down regulate," or they won't say down regulate. They'll say, "I just need to like zone out or drop out," and with like a movie or a TV show, or relax. Yeah. And what's happening is they're actually not doing that, because their brain's focusing on creating stories and still doesn't know the difference between a TV show or a business meeting or
still stimuli. Yeah,
it's still stimulus. And so truly getting that down regulation, either through like breath work, meditation, like a yoga nidra practice, even just a walk without your phone.
I was just
or
about to say, just
else.
walking without technology. And that's why I love running too. Like, we briefly took out a phone for a picture on our run today, but for the most part, no technology, nothing in sight, and just, feeling the cold air, feeling our lungs breathing, talking, engaging, and that is, it's a great release we don't get too often.
Yeah, and it's easier to do with someone else. I mean, a good audit on yourself is like, when was the last time you went outside for a walk without your phone? And just a walk for like 30 minutes. And even if thinking about doing that, what feelings come up? Oh, I'm going to miss out. I'm not going to get something. Yeah. And so I work with a lot of clients who I suggest, can you take a 15 or 20 minute walk in the middle of your day? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they can, but there's a feeling like, I need to respond. I need to be on Slack. I need to get back to that email. And it's understanding that by you allowing yourself to like slow down, you'll build back up so that when you come back, you can do more productive work.
Yeah. So now we can get into the athletic side of things, and because obviously that's a big part of both of our lives. And one thing I kind of hinted at earlier, but I guess you can expound upon, is you've tried just about every sport there is: strongman, yoga. We talked about the Turkish Get Ups, Ollie stuff, CrossFit, ultra running. I guess, what is your attitude towards trying all these different things? Is it purely just letting passion fuel all these different avenues, or is it curiosity, or is it just trying to have general fitness and just see where your limits lie? I guess, what are your thoughts on what guides you to try all these wide variety of different things?
Yeah, I think a word I've been really loving recently and leaning into is enthusiasm. Yeah, I think we're all searching to be enthusiastic about something. Yeah, and so once I start to gain some enthusiasm towards something, I just keep pulling on that string a little bit and then see where it lands. And so it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is the curiosity, right? Yeah. I'm just curious on what it would feel like to run 50 miles, what it would feel like to lift, a certain amount of weight over my head, and just stuff that I like. I enjoy it. And so I have always been athletic. I've always liked moving my body. I've been a very like kinesthetic kind of individual. And so, there's not enough hours in the day for me to do the things that I want to do physically. I just
feel that way a lot of times. I definitely, I was telling you earlier, I just have so many interests to a fault, to where there just isn't enough time, or there aren't enough lives and I guess, lives that I can live to pursue all these things independently, right? So you almost have to draw back and figure out, okay, well, let me pursue this, pursue that. So like right now I'm on an ultra marathon kick. Later on I might get into these different things, high rocks or tactical games or whatever. Before that I was into bodybuilding. So it really is letting enthusiasm and curiosity to lead the way. And I think, we all have that childlike curiosity when we are a kid, but it's almost beaten out of us as we get older. We're almost made to be more realistic, stay in line, follow this path. And I think the more we can let our enthusiasm, as you mentioned, what excites us, what makes us feel alive, letting that lead the way into the interests we pursue, I think we definitely would feel a lot, happier and feel less stuck. you know.
I mean, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it because it's so true.
Yeah.
How much we allow the outside world
And
to beat us down.
People throw away their lives, letting an external doubt or expectations control their entire life, and they only realize it by the time they're 50, 60, 70, right?
Yeah, I'm hopefully earlier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a lot of my clients, you know, I have some clients that are in their 70s, but a lot of them are younger.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's some grief on that. You know,
Yeah.
they have to realize that they can't go back and change the past. You know, we're living in the past. You know, it creates like depression. Living in the future creates anxiety. We try to live as much as we can in the present. And so it is really sad when we allow the outside world to put those things on us. And that's why a large part of my overall mission on this world is to help people, you know, allow themselves to live the life that they really want. Yeah. And with physically, it's super fun. Like, it's fun to talk about. It's light. It's
fun,
whatever.
and it's obvious, right? It's right in your face.
You can see it.
Yeah.
You can also feel it. Like I'm gonna viscerally feel what it's like to like push 300 pounds over my head or hold it. Whereas if I gain, you know, like I have this saying like emotional gains. And so if I get some emotional gains, no one's going to see it. One, no one's going to feel it. No one's really going to care about it except for me or maybe the person I'm having those gains with. But that is the thing that's going to impact my life way more than any amount of weight I could ever lift.
Yeah. One thing that you've done specifically, and maybe you've always done it, but specifically with the past few feats you've done, is tying a cause that's important to you to a feat. So with the Turkish Get Ups, you tied it to awareness of, you know, veteran mental health and suicide prevention. And with the 82 miles paddleboarding from Florida to the Bahamas, or maybe it's vice versa, either way, you're 82 miles on paddleboarding, you tied that to crossing for cystic fibrosis. So I guess, you know, what makes tying a cause so important to you, and I guess making sure that, you know, your physical abilities go more beyond personal achievement and personal recognition and attention, and they go more towards a universal cause?
Yeah, I think it doesn't need to be to a specific organization, but it's the idea of why are you working on improving yourself, or why do you want to challenge yourself? And hopefully it's so that you can show up in the world as a better person. And then, you know, from that could be, you know, linking up with a cause. And so for the Turkish Get Up, my grandfather died by suicide when I was really young, and that had a lot of effect on my family on ways that I never knew at the time, and like I'm learning about more as I get older. And so I have a lot of, you know, obviously curiosity and care, and I'm emotionally invested in that. And so I want to help others, you know, work through that so that they can gain the tools that they want to gain. And so if I can use some of my physicality to help, you know, push this the Mission 22, which is a great organization that helps veterans, then why not? Yeah,
why not raise awareness at the same time? One question I have that, you know, we could probably go in a lot of directions with, but that really stands out to me is how you operate and act as a role model in fatherhood for your girlfriend's son. Because I think that's something that, you know, maybe parents on Instagram maybe recognize and appreciate when you're really spending a lot of time and throwing him around in the air and spending a lot of time with him. But I think it really shapes everyone's life, but especially I think young boys, is having that, you know, having a good, strong fatherly figure that they can look up to, not for what, you know, just strength is, but emotional strength, mental strength, and just having that person to look up to. I guess, you know, what drives you to be as involved as you are, besides, you know, having that intimate relationship with, you know, his mother? What are your thoughts on that idea of fatherhood and I guess being a role model, whether it's biological or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not his biological father, and so I'm kind of number 3 on the list, but I've really worked for that in a lot of ways. And what I mean by work for it is just showing up as consistently as I can for him, because he doesn't choose to have me in his life. If it was up to him, I probably wouldn't be in his life. I mean, maybe now we have a lot of fun together, and so he looks forward to seeing me, but it wasn't the case in the beginning. And so that's maybe one of the most proud relationships I have is my relationship with him, because of the unconditional love that I just pour into him. And he's such a young, sweet, like, boy that just cares and loves the world. And He's 6 years old. I met him when he was just 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been able to really allow our relationship to grow. And for me, I want to just show up as consistently as I can with him. I want him to feel safe and secure when I'm around. I want to show up, as the most, not necessarily like, I want to be honest with him, but it's also, he's 6 years old, so he doesn't understand. Like, if I'm having a bad day, the last thing I'm going to do is take it out on him, or even just show it to him. Like, as a man, I want to be able to handle that on my own, and then come up and show and be consistent in my love and support for him.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe you can explain, maybe the role models you had growing up, or your father growing up. But I know for me, it was as you mentioned, when you're a kid, you don't really realize the things that your parents are doing or going through, or the why behind a lot of their actions or reactions until a lot later. And so, the more I've been able to reflect on things, especially with, how I have almost adopted the same workaholic attitude and behaviors as my dad, I can kind of see how much he worked and fought for us. And he's really that just traditional stereotype. He didn't work blue collar, but almost in the level of a blue collar worker dad, to where, constantly working, never complained about it, always, was trying to make sure that we had food on the table, always made sure that, we had what we needed for, baseball equipment for the game or whatever. Just always, putting, I guess, us first, and like you said, showing up. And sometimes it's hard to appreciate those things later on, but it really does, especially in those like foundational years, like he's in now. It really plays a factor, I think, how they continue to grow up and develop, and how they, especially even when it comes to how you interact with Kelly, right? He's seen how to treat a woman, how someone's going to treat his mother, and those things just have such a big impact years and years down the line with how they behave and what they expect out of future partners or people in general.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of times what you mentioned they're easier to understand things, right? It's not always easy to put food on the table. It's not always easy to have the equipment. But one thing that I really strive for with Rem is making sure that I'm there for him emotionally, and I can be there for him in those types of ways where depending on where he is neurologically as he's growing up and his brain's evolving, like allowing him the space to be a kid and not putting my own projections or insecurities or annoyances on him. Like a great example,
letting him be a clean slate.
Every day, clean slate. And he gives me that. He's like a clean slate. Like, and so if I'm having a rough day and then he comes home and is having a rough day, the last thing I want to do is take my rough day out on him. I want to be able to be there to allow him the space to have his own experience. And that is the strength that I'm really proud of, that I continue to grow with him.
And even show him how to handle those tough moments or situations. Well, Mike, we talked about I enjoy that we talked about more than just fitness, because I'm sure you talked about fitness on plenty of podcasts, and I certainly have had so many athletes on my podcast. It was good to get a lot beyond that, get more emotional, spiritual, mindset, all these different things. And I think there's tons of practical tidbits and advice that people can take out of this. So I appreciate you taking the time and us getting to meet in person and chat about all this. Where can people find you?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for coming to my home.
Of course.
Being able to run some of my local trails with me.
Of course, yeah. Good times.
People can find me on my website, mikeaidala.com, and on social media, on Instagram. I'm trying to put more information out on my website and then through a newsletter. You can sign up for my newsletter at the website.
Is it Mike.Aidala?
That's my Instagram, yeah.
Yeah, I was just want to make sure that it wasn't just word for word. Okay, awesome. Well, like usual, if you guys got something out of this, please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.